2021. We are so excited to be with you today. My name is Laura Maranaka. I'm an entrepreneur in New York City. All of us from the Economia Francesco are welcoming you today. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to everybody at United World Project, of course, the Economia Francesco and the Vatican. For folks just joining us for the first time and who have never heard of EOF, EOF are young people, 2,000 young economists, entrepreneurs, and change makers who were selected to help bring forth a new economy in the spirit of the teachings of Saint Francis. We are so excited that we get to hear from the people in the Policies and Happiness Village in Economia Francesco and the people in the Work and Care Village in the Economia Francesco. You know, when Pope Francis wrote his encyclicals, he inspired all young people tremendously. You are going to get to hear from young people today in Indonesia, in Italy, in Brazil, Japan, Mexico, the United States, South Africa, so many incredible young people who are helping transform the world to create a better future. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis says, every act of cruelty towards any creature is contrary to human dignity. So we are bringing back human dignity, human flourishing, presenting projects, presenting the work that we've been doing all of 2020 into 2021 throughout the global pandemic. We realize it's been a tough year for everybody in every corner of the world. And these are proposals to give young people, world leaders, prime ministers, heads of companies, hope for the future. Real projects that can be realized in 2022 and beyond. With that, I welcome Sophia. Sophia is joining us live from Brazil. And Sophia, please introduce yourself. We give the floor to you.
Thank you, Laura. Can you hear me? Okay. It's a pleasure to be here. We are from the Policies and Happiness Village. And first I want to stress that this village is about happiness, but it's a very specific kind of happiness. If you could share, yeah. So actually, when we think about happiness, we could say hedonistic happiness, which is a very exclusive kind of happiness because it's about the fulfillment of one individual happiness while other people or the environment can be terrified. So as you can see in this picture, only one is happy, but in the detriment of many others. And when the happiness we want to bring up in our village, next slide, please, is happiness as Eudaimonia, which means it's an inclusive kind of happiness, as is the name of our project, Inclusive Mapping. So happiness as Eudaimonia is all-inclusive, and it means that everyone can share this happiness. There are many studies that shows that that relationship are what matter for happiness after the basic needs are met. So when we have a house and food on the table, education, after that, it is not our income that is going to increase our happiness, but actually the relationships. So relationships matter more than objects do. And from this project, we started to think, what if we could map the social connections and the local resources that actually enhance community vitality? Because usually when we think about maps or when we see maps, next slide, please. We see the division. So we see the division between territories and on a more local scale. We see the division between the streets, between the buildings, but actually by looking at these maps, can you see anything about the story of the people who live there? Can we see about the connections that exist there? Clearly not. So actually what we want to do with inclusive mapping is show the connections that are actually contributing to this territory to be able to flourish. Next. So Francesco is going to take the floor now. Dan?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. As Sophia said, mainstream maps that we have seen show divisions. Of course, they are effective and useful, but we think that the story of a place is narrated, how the stories of a place is narrated can influence social life and inclusion. So maps actually have the power of storytelling. With our proposal, we aim to use this power. So inclusive mapping, in our project, we reveal and narrate stories which are usually hidden, invisible, or even silent, as this picture in a funny way shows. In these ways, communities can flourish through an eudaimonic narrative. Of course, when we talk about narrative and economics, we have to bear in mind the tremendous contribution of Prof. Robert J. Schiller, Nobel Prize in Economics in 2013. For instance, it teaches us that what an economist wants to understand the most significant economic events in history, they rarely focus on the importance of narratives. So as young participants of Economy of Francesco, we want to suggest the need to consider narrative in economics. Most of disciplines such as anthropology, sociology, psychology, and even political science consider the word narrative in their scientific literature. Unfortunately, as all we can see, data from economics and finance don't follow this trend. So in our humble opinion, it's time to commit with narrative in economics. So if how the story of a place is narrated influence how it develops, we as a village of policy and happiness, we've been asking ourselves, what if maps could tell stories of unity instead of divisions? So in order to do so, we are trying to work to prepare a toolkit where we suggest to map relational goods, local resources, community dreams, soundscapes, uplifting places, green areas, urban experience, happy memories. We want to make people aware of their resources. We love to think that a representation of good resources of a territory help to tackle the bad things. Obviously, we are not ignoring the problems. We want to help people to consider a new eudaimonic narrative. If we want to sum up, if things create happiness, it can be mapped. It can help a community. As previously mentioned, for this project, we imagine the creation of what we call warm technologies, interactive tools that connect people, stimulate social interaction. And with these social interactions, inclusive mapping can be a process. And the new map that has been co-created and co-governed as commons to help people flourish. So this wants to be our contribute in order to help decision maker and policy maker to create and co-govern the commons. So Sophia, if you may add something in that point, thank you.
So thank you, Francesco. What I want to say here is that the idea connected to Elinor Ostrom is that the map itself, the result of the mapping, is not our focus, but actually the process. For example, this is a photo in a community I was mapping with the children, and a way to map was doing drawings. And then this was a way for children to gather and say what is happening. And then they realize that if we can see a resource, they can also see. So actually, it's kind of serendipitous process because every community has its specificity. And this is also something that Elinor Ostrom stresses a lot, that the framework needs to be flexible and needs to be local. So this is our project. If you could go to the last slide. If you want to join inclusive mapping, you can write to myself or to Francesco, and thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Inclusive Mapping. And now we go to penguin cities. So what are penguin cities? This is Laudato Si in action. Next slide, please. All right. When the EOF school began, Professor Luigino Bruni presented this quote on his very first slide. And it says, "It is true that certain living creatures, as bees and ants, live sociably one with another, and therefore some man may perhaps desire to know why mankind cannot do the same." We draw great inspiration from this quote, and really, all across the planet, you look at the people that are people, young entrepreneurs, economists, change makers in EOF. Not all of us live in major cities. We don't all live in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Rome, and New York City. The majority live in smaller cities and towns. That is significant. That is important. We really are shining the spotlight on the young women and men who come from Fano, Italy, who come from Bainbridge Island, Washington, people who have a unique perspective on the world. They see human flourishing in action because they live closer to nature. And if we go to the next slide, please, we will see the significance of what this means. Sophia and Francesco shared a beautiful explanation of inclusive mapping. There is an architect in Mexico who is getting involved and being a great support to inclusive mapping. In penguin cities, we are tackling the economic principle called degglomeration. We are tackling Laudato Si in action. We are bringing the Pope's encyclical to people that may not have heard of it before. Lots of colleagues, lots of friends, lots of people come from different backgrounds. People who are Hindu by nature, people who are Buddhist by nature, Muslim, Jewish, everybody. And really, you see the love globally for Pope Francis because the writing in Laudato Si has universal appeal. Imagine if we could transform all cities across the planet to really embody the values of Laudato Si, to really promote human flourishing and planetary flourishing in a real concrete way. This is a rendering from our great partner 3 Deluxe in Germany to create a floating biotope campus. Imagine if New York City had a living building in the Hudson River that respects the Hudson River, respects what humans need, respects what all creatures on land and under the sea need to really promote a city of the future, a healthy working environment for women and men to help transform the world. Next slide, please. Perfect. So you can see behind me that this is a building that I am building in New York City. And what is special is that it brings the community together. Penguin cities anywhere across the planet, whether it's Indonesia or Japan or South Africa or Mexico, every city can honor and respect their penguin cities. These are cities that might have a population of less than 1 million people. What does this mean? If you live in an urban environment, you don't get enough nature. We've all seen that during the global pandemic. If you live in a smaller city, you probably live closer to nature. You might have experience with farming. You might have experience as a veterinarian or a marine biologist. Yet, where did you do your education? You probably had to move for a short period of your life to a mega city like Rome or Tokyo or London for your education. What does this mean if you are a child growing up in an urban environment? It means that your parents need the resources to take you to nature within the city. This is a concept for a building of the future to promote human flourishing and planetary flourishing. You see that it is terraced, makes great use of water. There is a pond, which is its own biotope. There is a convening area at the top with a stage for people to present their ideas, present their projects, get funding, and support work being done on the ground in every corner of the world to bring projects to life, to support female entrepreneurs, and to really give a voice to the voiceless. If we go to the next slide, please.
It's the last one indeed.
Okay, good. So I will add to this verbally. If you want to join inclusive mapping, you see the email addresses for Sophia and Francesco. I will also verbally tell the world, if you want to join Penguin Cities, you can email Laura Muranaka, laura@wetheplanet.io. The other people in our village will provide their contact information. It is my pleasure now. We go live from New York to live in Indonesia. Dian, it's a pleasure to welcome you. Dian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, from United States, now we move to Asia. Hello, good evening, everyone. It's already dark here. Thank you for having me here in the Dare to Care United World Week. My name is Eudaimonia Savitri. I'm a public policy professional from Indonesia. As a representative of the Happiness and Policies Village, I and my colleague, Miriam Castillo, are going to talk about our proposal, Children Flourishing Index, which is very relevant to the current global situation. We know that although vaccines and foreign aids are coming from other countries, and then economic activities start to reopen, things get back to normal with some adjustments. But it seems that discussion about children well-being is still missing everywhere. Meanwhile, children population is the most affected group in the society. They could be the last group to receive COVID vaccines. They are also suffering from school closures, and many children from poor background are suffering from malnutrition. But before exploring Children Flourishing Index further, I will start this presentation with the concept of counterfactual thinking. By analyzing a particular policy or situation in a counterfactual manner, hopefully we could be more aware of our privilege and huge inequality gap around us. And I also hope that this method could improve our empathy and critical thinking. So in the end, as mentioned by Professor Noam Chomsky here, we will be more responsible for our privilege. Now we move to the slide 2. Okay, so what is counterfactual? I'm sure that some of you with economic background are familiar with counterfactual to find causal evidence. This method teaches me to imagine myself having an identical twin or a clone in an alternate universe. In this case, my clone will choose a very different lifestyle. And if I'm not mistaken, those nerd economists call it as treatment. And then by observing my clone's outcome, we could quantify the probability of what would have happened if the treatment was different. For example, what would have happened if I were born as an undocumented indigenous person living in a slum area in an isolated mountain? How much probability that I had to pursue higher education? And then we move to the slide 3. So I hope that now we already had a picture in our mind on how to do counterfactual game. Okay, so now let's start with clone number 1. What will have happened if you were a boy with if you were born as a boy with physical disability? You have 7 siblings. Both of your parents are only graduated from elementary school. Both of your parents only speak ethnic language. You belong to ethnic minority. Your father works in informal sector. You live in a slum area. You have been working as a tailor boy since you were 8 years old to help your father earn more money. How much probability that you had to thrive, to get quality education, to access proper treatment for your disability, and the most important thing, to be confident in yourself. Now we move to the next clone, the next slide. What will have happened if you were an undocumented migrant girl who are separated from your father while you take a long journey to flee from war? You have to share your food with your 3 siblings. But your mother does not speak English, so she cannot communicate with non-governmental organization volunteers to help you. You live in a crowded refugee camp with bad sanitation. You can't access internet and virtual classes in your language, so you don't know what to do. You have to take care of your baby sister, even though you are still 6 years old. And the worst part of all is that you don't eat nutritious food and you go hungry every night. So how much probability that you had to thrive, to be free from infectious disease, to improve your math skills, which could be useful when you grow up, and the most important thing, to be confident in yourself. And in the next slide, in slide 3, from these small counterfactual exercises that I have mentioned before, I do hope that now you could understand the feeling and situation faced by marginalized children, children who are labeled as lazy, poor, not smart, as outsiders. We heard enough from some media or opposition political parties that frame children who are different as not part of the society. And unfortunately, somehow we get trapped in the groupthink and just follow the mainstream opinions, although it might not be true. So we move to the next slide. That is why I do believe that independent thinking and empathetic judgment is more important than ever, not only for an equal society, but also for a just society. And for the reason, for a more flourishing society, we'd like to propose Children Flourishing Index. After this, my colleague Miriam will explain more details about Children Flourishing Index, especially about quality education, access to healthcare, and rights for nutritious food. Okay, thank you. Now we move to Brazil. It's morning there. Hello, Miriam.
Terima kasih. Hello. Thank you, Gia. You did great. So, hello, everyone. Bom dia. Good morning from Brazil. I'm Miriam Castelo from São Lourenço, a countryside town. And I work as a change maker and entrepreneur at Dream Factory and Right to Dream movement, where we work with advocacy so everyone can have the right to dream. And here in the economy of Francesco, with amazing people and family around the world, we work to give a new soul and leave no one behind in the economy. So I'm proudly part of the Positive Happiness Village, working to develop with many hands the Children Flourishing Index. So why to create a Children's Flourishing Index? I don't need to repeat, but we pursue lots of metrics, and most of them are normally financial metrics, as gross domestic product, as human development index, comparing things like expectancy, education, and income per capita. We also have the OECD Better Life Index, which takes a broader view, comparing countries on matters around well-being, like work-life balance, life satisfaction, income and jobs and housing. However, what are the existing measures that look to the future? A lot of the existing measures look at the here and now. And what makes the Children Flourishing Index unique is that if we truly thinking long-term and thinking in our future, we shouldn't just think of the flourishing of our generation, but think about future generations. And that's where the Children Flourishing Index come in. The purpose of our index is to incentivize, sorry for the Portuguese accent, incentivize decision makers to implement policies that support children and future generations to flourish. There were many people involved, as I said. I'm one of them. And 5 decades of studies shows that happiness depends on genuine human conditions. Once people have the basics to live a decent life, it's their relational well-being rather than their material well-being that becomes the primary source of their happiness. Our proposal for a Children's Flourishing Index is to build a composite index that measures the progress of present and future generations so that we can guide policymakers to think beyond the utility of the current generation, but on the flourishing of our children and future generations. Recognizing relational well-being, the index will go beyond a reductionist, individualistic understanding of happiness to allow us to consider the extent to which a policy or intervention make a positive impact on dimensions like environment and nature, health and well-being, food security and nutrition, perception of beauty, transformational and quality education, simplicity and curiosity, gender equality, generativity and participatory process. So by measuring all of them, we can guarantee and bring to these policymakers a way, a path, so we can guarantee also flourishing, the kids to flourish. And as we were talking before, we have these basic needs that when fulfilled, they give us the ability to dream and to look with simplicity and curiosity, and also being able to flourish in well-being. And if we talk about nature, environment, and beauty, even in urban areas, are the common spaces for relationships good to blossom? And this makes us go to the penguin model, as Laura was saying, giving time to build quality family bonds, love and parental relationships. This is really important for us as well. The ability to remain curious and to have the right to dream big, and the equality between all race, ethnicities, and genders. Our next step is finishing and validating our index, and we will make webinars to talk about them. This is a way for being responsible for all humankind. And as you saw, flourishing is the theme, the main theme for our village, and to be a united family, leaving no one behind. Thank you. And I pass the ball back to New York. Oh, and if you want to be part of our index together with us, you can just email me, or email our village, and I'll put on the chat so everyone can see. It's miriamcastello@gmail.com. So Laura, how is New York?
Fantastic, Marian. Thank you, Children's Flourishing Index. So, really, we've had an extraordinary morning already with you. There's much, much more to come. Dare to Care is fantastic. It's really our honor to be sharing the stage with so many incredible women and men from across the planet. You know, a quote from Pope Francis that inspires us all is that there can be no renewal of our relationship with nature without a renewal of humanity itself. And in the words of Pope Francis, you know, this sums up everything Policies and Happiness is doing for 2021, 2022, and beyond. These projects are going to take years to realize, to do it well, to find the funding, to give young entrepreneurs, young economists, young change makers the resources to make this a reality. We cannot wait until we can all travel safely to Assisi to finally meet one another in person. We want to express our tremendous gratitude to Professor Luigino Bruni, to Maria Gaglione, to Yolanda Martins. You three move mountains every day to give young entrepreneurs and young people the opportunity. And with this, it is my great pleasure to introduce the next village in the economy of Francesco, Georgia Nigri and Sarah Prenger. And with that, the floor is yours, Georgia.
Yes, thank you. I want to pass the word to Sara right away, but I just really like what has been set up to now. You know, we always say that since Giotto didn't paint the 29th scene of embracing the lepers, that's the new narrative that we are trying to promote right now as the economy of Francesco. So I think it's very important that Francesco, I mean, exactly, you know, his name just represents us perfectly, actually brought that up. And I like how we can also be the new clones. And I invite everyone to actually take the privilege walk and to see where you stand and where everything you have done up to now, if it was up to you or if, you know, you were lucky, because many of us are very lucky to be here, and we try to be more inclusive to actually hug all our fratelli tutti. That's what I would like to say. So I will conclude later, and let me pass the word to Sara.
Thanks a lot, Georgia, and thanks a lot, everyone, for giving us a space here to present a little bit our discussion and what we're doing. And Georgia, she's coordinating our village and all this heavy work which we're doing. So thanks a lot also in that occasion to Georgia for that. And I'm a village member. Also, as some of you said, I'm there as a change maker and the current president of the International Young Christian Workers. And I would like to present a little bit as a content of our conclusion and the discussion which we're having. And I have a small presentation for that. I hope it is fine if I will just share it, or I don't know if, yeah, okay. So I hope everyone can see it. And yeah, as mentioned, we are the Work and Care Village in the big project of the economy of Francis, which has been already introduced by our friends from another village. And we are basically reflecting on the relation of work and care and work. And our basically conviction is actually that it should be the same. Work must be care and care must be work. because actually also in the Catholic thinking, but also in our human understanding, our main vocation should be that we care for each other. And the most important thing that anyone can do in this world is to care for someone else, to take care for the education, to take care for the health, but also to promote no care for our environment, for the ecology, and for our society, which includes no work for peace and all actions we can do for solidarity. That is all what we understand by care. And this must be done by all of us all the time, including what we call work. And it is currently, it's a big contradiction that we somehow we see work as something which is separate from what we are doing. Because also in the current system, you're paid for what you do. So it's like, you're not yourself, no? You're doing it something else. And it's also a big contradiction that actually care work seems to be less valorized than other forms of work. For example, if you work in healthcare, if you work in education, very usually you have much worse working conditions than if you work in technology. Or even if people work in a arm producing sector, producing arms, which is really destructive. Very often they will have good salaries, good working conditions, much better than if you work in a cleaning or childcare, etc. So that is one of the contradictions which we see looking at the current society. But the other thing is also about what we call unpaid care work. All these millions of working hours which are spent in families, looking for the elder, looking for the children, cleaning houses. And of course, there's a huge link to gender equality, because most of the care work in this world, be it paid care work or unpaid care work, it is done by women. So looking at the scenario, we do have some proposals as Work and Care Village from the Economy of Francis. On the one hand, we propose a reduction of what we call paid working hours for all. Because in the current society, we all know it. We are all working minimum, or most of us, what is regarded as normal is to work around 40 hours a week. And there is not so much time for what is called unpaid care work. And everyone is stressed. And also in society, usually if you ask someone, what do you do? The answer will be expected what kind of paid work you're doing or what kind of education you're doing. But it's not so much the responsibility in the family or in the community, which could be unpaid care work. So in that sense, we propose a reduction of paid working hours for all, but not like that, but in order for everyone to be able to engage in unpaid care work. And this should also be connected to a cultural change. So we're hoping that maybe in the future, at a party, if people do small talk and they will ask, what do you do? It's actually the question, what care work do you engage in? And secondly, we think that really what we need all is social protection. And this should be a really strong social protection. And if we talk about social protection, it includes various aspects. On the one hand, it is really a strong healthcare system. It's a strong and qualitative and free education. And it's strong and free and qualitative public transport, including all the other welfare measures, what we understand by social protection. It would also include a basic income for all, also meaning more independence from what we understand by paid work in almost most aspects, and it would include dignified working conditions for care workers. So these are some basic proposals. It's not everything, and it's just a summary, also looking at the time. And we're really open to engage in discussion. Whatever we do, we have to be responsible of what we do and what others do. But yeah, this is what we think must be done in the society. Thanks a lot, and I will give over the floor to Georgia to explain a little more of what we have been doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. Zoom is giving me weird messages. Yeah, so we have been trying to pass, actually, I was on a webinar yesterday, a law in Italy to reduce the working hours. And we have been working closely with Professor Nadelsky and Professor Mallison because they're going to introduce part-time for all as a normative structure. So they're trying Canada. And we are actually doing various pilots, also with the help of Felipe from Economy of Communion, to see if that actually can be implemented. Because one thing that we think is important, as she was saying, for the cultural change is that it starts from us. You know, there's always an argument of, so do we need a systems change to have a personal change, or do we need a personal change to have a systems change? I don't know. It's like, you know, there's a saying in Italy about the egg and the chicken, you know, so who was there first? I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer, but the point is, when you can't find what you're looking for, when you can't find those nice people in the world, you can decide to be them. And when you can't find nature or the city in your city, then you can build one, you know? So I think that that would be the message that we would want to give. And today we shared, so some of the initiatives from the Policies for Happiness and the Work and Care Village. But let's remember that, first of all, Economy of Francesco is an ongoing process. And second of all, we are 12 thematic villages. So, you know, we have our finance and humanities, we have our agriculture and justice, our energy. So everybody is working on different projects. And luckily, since we have this very good mix of change makers, researchers, and entrepreneurs, we are actually focused on working together, like today, for an intra-village activity, so that we can actually bring the new economic movement ahead. So I don't know if we want to open to some questions as well. I saw people made comments on Ostrom. Elias, did you want to say something on that? I don't know if actually they can intervene in this context, but I would love people to intervene from the audience, since we have people connected with us. Can we do that?
Definitely. If it's technically possible, let's try. I'm going to try reading questions off of the chat. Georgia, jump in. You co-moderate this with me. Let's look at the questions. Let's try to answer as many as possible. Thank you. You know, United World Project, you have the best production team. So here we go. Thank you immensely. I will also say, everybody in the audience, please go on Instagram, please go on Twitter, use the hashtag Dare to Care. This is a very important day in the world, week in the world. We are super excited to be here and to support all of your incredible work. Georgia, do you see question number 1?
Yeah, actually, they wanted to know more about the index. I don't know if we can actually share, because I'm happy to share it on YouTube as well, more details on how they can find out more about it, because we just kind of gave an overview right now.
Awesome.
And then Sabine was asking about, she was mentioning, she made a comment about how the reduction would be important. And actually, I'm glad that she said that, because some of the things that emerged from young people was that they're worried that the reduction in hours will just mean that they have a contract with reduced hours, but then, you know, they're making the same pay, or they end up working the same amount of time, because that's one of the problems that we have. So they're overbeared. Something else that emerged as well was that, and I like that because Professor Nadelsky always says that, is she always says, so who makes your dinner? You know, on top of the privilege walk, you know, you always have to see who does do the care in your house. And, you know, it might be your mother, it might be your father, it might be your sister, you know, it might be somebody, but who does the care? Because that also makes you realize how important it is, because we're all care receivers and caregivers. So if that is skewed in our everyday life, then it's something we need to evaluate. And I think that's something that has emerged. And it goes back to, again, I mean, I know it's complicated technically to add speakers to participant in the tragedy of the commons. If we don't realize, I just kept picking up questions that I see coming up. If we don't realize how important the shared, even our whole oikos is in general, then we will never be able to actually place or draw a line to where we need to intervene and to where things are as is. And this is all things that have emerged today, from the indexes, from the clones, from the narratives. So that's important. You do realize that the only reason why the poor were not in the narratives back in Assisi was because just a small group of people, so the rich people, just the rich people, quote unquote, because what does rich mean, right? So they decided that Assisi wasn't going to be as beautiful if people would find out that lepers were there. But I mean, they were there. It's not like we can just cancel these people out of the system, but that's what we did, you know? And when people are not in the narratives, they're not part of what we discuss every day, what is in our cities, what we're doing. And so we need to try to bring this back in with all the different messages and all the different things that we're doing.
Well said. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to ask you a question in a minute, Georgia, because really, if you look at what we are doing right now, we have gone into the virtual world of Zoom. We are having a real connection. We are working across borders and time zones, and this is fantastic. And it's important to spend a minute talking about what COVID-19 means to people globally, because it's not over. Right now, India is getting hammered by the COVID-19 virus. India is a country where most people live in multi-generational households. So it's a very different situation from Europe. Very different situation from the United States. When you have 5 adults and a baby living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, what do? You cannot just tell people to wear a mask, wash your hands, and stay home. There is no water to wash your hands. There is no soap to take care of yourself, your family, your children, your elders. And it's really important to look at where we were 1 year ago. Because April, May 2020, Italy was getting hammered. New York City was getting hammered. We were losing 10,000 lives a day. Central Park was turned into a morgue because the ice skating rink was the only place outside where EMTs, medical first responders, could put the bodies so that their families could claim them, honor them, cremate, or bury according to the family's wishes. And so if you look at Asia right now, this is not an Indian problem. This is a global issue. There is a double variant. There are over 1 billion human beings in India. Children are taken out of school, girls in particular. Because when the schools close, the public schools, what happens to the children? If the families cannot afford to feed, clothe, and care for daughters, daughters get sold as child brides. It's very important to look at the whole world, to look at getting as many people the resources, the vaccine as possible, Professor Muhammad Yunus is a friend, is an elder in the economy of Francesco. He has a whole global program with the other Nobel laureates, prime ministers, and presidents to get young people, elders, all ages, to sign a pledge to make the vaccine accessible to as many people as possible. I want to ask you, Georgia, to take a moment to share with everybody, what did you see on the ground in Italy last year regarding COVID-19?
Yeah, I think mostly, as mentioned, the problem is not the same, because that's also something that happened. What you mentioned in India is also what happens in Brazil, in some areas, obviously, of Brazil, when they're like, wash your hands. Yeah, that's not something that's so common in many countries, just because, as you said, they don't have access to water and stuff. Ours was more like a finger pointing kind of thing. I felt that in Italy, it was more a problem of identity, where we kind of felt, I don't know, alone at one point, where everybody was like, okay, so if we just don't go to Italy, that's solved, which is not what happened. The only thing is that we need, and this is also another problem, this is not the only disease that we have. That's the thing. Like, there are many other diseases that are around and that need to be taken into consideration. And as for work, we need to consider exactly the different kind of people and where they come from. The same goes for diseases. I am actually happy that I'm not happy actually, but with the COVID crisis, at least they created the COVID-19 at the dicastery. So they have been doing a lot of work actually, and they have been even talking to all the various governments to get this going. So that's just to answer your question, Laura, and I'll pass the word to Miriam right now. Just to answer Clara, because I saw there was a question in the chat. So we have 3 levels of pilots. One is institutional, which is what they're trying to do in Canada. One is company-based. So the pilot would be like, some companies have decided to reduce working hours and add on welfare. So we're trying to see how that works. And the third level of pilots is by law. So like in Italy, we're trying to see if the law will actually pass. They have passed it in Emilia-Romagna, so it's a very specific regional, but we're trying to see if it'll get accepted at a government level. Miriam, go ahead.
Thanks, Georgia. Thanks for mentioning Brazil as well. And the question that comes to me by listening to all of us is, what can each one of us do with our privilege? Because I also, even being a Brazilian, I have a lot of privilege, or like Diane as well, living in Indonesia and being from the South. We know that we have privilege, but we are still underprivileged in some ways. So what can we all do? Because we are all responsible for all humankind. And as Laura quoted in the beginning, what Pope Francis said about not being cruel and seeing each other in the streets and whatever we are, you know. And for who wants to get to know more, I just want to say that you can enter in the Francesco Economy website. So you can also come and participate in our village, and you'll be welcome. And I put in the chat, I don't know if you saw. And for the Policies and Happiness Village, we have a whole work and paper with all the projects that we are doing. And for the CFI, the Children Flourishing Index, I also leave my email and you contact us.
Fantastic.
I pass the ball back to Laura. Thank you, Georgia.
Yeah, Laura, I want to add something to what you said before, because the 2000 cap, which we had in the beginning, was obviously because, again, we have to go to Assisi, we have to see the Pope. So, I mean, we have security reasons for it. The good thing of being virtual was that we were able to actually expand. So even though we still have the 2000 basic participant cap, which is the people that have been very active, everybody has been able to bring their communities on board, which has been something that has been really heartwarming for all of us.
Absolutely. Well said. And I am going to put out the call to action to everybody watching. Do follow the Economia Francesco on Instagram. Lourdes is posting. She is our rock star. I think the best thing we can do as a global community living in the digital age is to post more about the projects, more about the 12 villages on Instagram and Twitter, so people can connect with what they want to connect with. Some people love penguins and nature and architecture. Some people are medical doctors and are super passionate about getting the vaccine to as many women and men across the planet. Some people are social workers. Some people are mothers. Some people are nurses. There is something to connect with in the full Economia Francesco for everybody. I also want to put it out there that you can be from any faith. We really welcome everybody. You see it in our faces. My family background is Japanese and Mexican. You see Brazil, you see the beauty of Indonesia, you see the beauty of Italy. You see so many incredible women and men that are giving their time and their talent to really make this the future. The economy of Francesco is our future for human flourishing, for planetary flourishing, to remember to live Laudato Si in action. And I know the Laudato Si week is coming up soon, later in May. So please, please look at the Instagram for the Economy of Francesco to learn more, to celebrate Laudato Si week. And once again, thank you to everybody. Thank you to United World Project. Use the hashtag Dare to Care. Thanks, everybody.
Gondoskodás.
Voivoda.
Care.
Proteger.
Забота.
رعاية. Condução.
Ter atenção.
Sorge tragen.
Niaisu.
Cuidar.
Aruga.